Hey, I'm Ben Carroll, and I am on Musicians on the Record. Hit it.
Hi, welcome to Musicians on the Record. I'm David Ward. This is the show where we bring you the musician's story, and I am super excited. On the show today, we've got guitarist, vocalist, and teacher Ben Carroll is on the show. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm really glad you're here. We're live in the MOTR Studios, the new MOTR Studios for the first time with Ben. Great way to christen it, I think. Thank you for that. Yeah. So you've had some pretty major success with a band called Ra. You're lead guitarist and being on tour, and I want to talk a bunch about that story and where you're at musically today. But let's start with, when did you first fall in love with the guitar?
With the guitar? Well, that would probably be 8th grade. 8th grade, 7th or 8th grade. I think I got my first guitar in the 8th grade. I finally convinced my parents to get me one.
What was it?
It was a Fender Bullet, I think. Yeah. Pre-Squire days.
Yes, right. So got a Squire right over in the corner there.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And so what was driving that love of guitar? Why did you want one? Who were you listening to?
So at that time, you know, when I was 11, I guess I started when I was 11. I remember that much. So 7th or 8th grade. I was, you know, listening to a lot of Motley Crue and Metallica, and that was where it was at when I was in the 8th grade.
Right. And where did you grow up, Ben?
I grew up in Salisbury, Massachusetts.
Yeah. What was that like with the music scene around there?
There was a fair amount of people that played music in high school, you know, and I had a couple bands in high school, but nothing ever, you know, it was never a complete band. But then when I got out of high school, I went to Berklee in Boston. Okay. So then, you know, I started practicing a lot. And I had been doing that in high school, basically woodshedded for way too many years of my life. And just got into Berklee and just, you know, just started doing a lot of practicing.
They make you practice, from what I've heard at Berklee, right?
They beat you if you don't.
Sure, right, exactly. Yeah. So what was that like with the folks of saying, "Hey, Mom and Dad, I want to go study music at Berklee"?
They were really supportive. I think because, you know, I'd spent so much time with the instrument. You know, that was my main motivation. Since, you know, I got the guitar when I was 11, but I started practicing a lot by the time I was like 14, 15. And by the time I was 16 and 17, I was obsessively practicing.
Okay. How many hours a day would you guess?
At that point, 5 or 6, and then, you know, as I got a little older, you know, upwards of 8 hours until I started having repetitive strain injuries repeatedly.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard that can happen, certainly with the guitar and sometimes drums. By the way, people may be able to see Bob will be joining us today with the interview, just because we need some good canine energy as well. So were there any important teachers that were there early on for you, or are you mostly self-taught?
I had a couple guitar teachers. One when I was in middle school, and then a different one when I was in high school, and just local guys, and, you know, taught me the basics. I remember just being a sponge, and I would like shock them because they'd give me the scales and show up next week, and having been a teacher for 30 plus years now, you know, sometimes it takes the students a year to learn those. I would think, right? And I had them down the next week. Wow. Because I didn't, you know, I just thought that's what you're supposed to do.
Okay, amazing. So you went right to like the pentatonic scales or something?
But I had a couple teachers, John Grasso and then Dave Teresi. Okay. Right.
And who were those guitarists that you were listening to that just really lit your fire, lit your passion for music?
Well, when I discovered Steve Vai and Joe Satriani, that's when I started practicing a lot, and then I, you know, delved into the whole instrumental scene with Steve Morse and Marty Friedman and Jason Becker and all that stuff that was going on at that time. Just anything I could get my hands on.
Mind-blowing stuff, right?
Yeah.
So this was what year that you started at Berklee?
I started at Berklee in '94.
94. And so there must have been, whether in high school or getting to Berklee, a dream that was developing of where you wanted to go with music. What was that dream?
Oh yeah, I mean, I always wanted to play in a band. That was the dream.
That was the dream. Yeah. And then do what?
And then conquer the world.
Conquer the world,
obviously.
right, of course. Right? That's what you do in a rock band, right?
Yeah, be the best guitarist in the world.
Sure, that's right. Exactly. Yeah. So tell us how that journey went for you then at Berklee.
Yeah, so at Berklee, at first it was like being in Disneyland every day, just being surrounded by music, because high school was painful.
Can't be, right?
And I was a mediocre student until I discovered that there was a college that you could just do music, and then I was instantly an honor roll student.
Okay.
And then I got to Berklee, and I did put a lot of work in for a few years, and then I kind of got to the point where I felt like all the stuff I was learning was only stuff I would ever use if I taught at Berklee. So I decided to take a couple of years off and go out and actually play music, because at that point I still hadn't even been in a real band. I'd been in some haphazard accidental things, but
jamming with other students at school.
Yeah, jamming with other students at school and with friends and all that. But I decided to take some time off and really dedicate my life to trying to find a good band. So I got out of school. I dropped out and started one band called Absence of Faith. That we were together for about a year, and just a couple of guys that were veterans in the Massachusetts scene, which was at the time going really well, because Godsmack had just broken out of there. Godsmack and Power Man 5000 and Stained and all these bands were breaking out of Boston, yeah, so those guys knew a lot of people. So I was in a band with them for about a year, and then that band broke up, and I just kept searching for the right vocalist. It was always just looking for an awesome vocalist, and that's when I met Sahaj, who's the vocalist for Ra, and he was living in New York City, and as soon as I heard the songs he had recorded, I was like, that's the guy. That's the guy, yeah. So I went down and auditioned for the band, which
So they were already a band that was happening, right?
Well, it was a local band.
A local band, okay.
Yeah, and it was just him and a drummer.
Okay.
And so I went down there and met Sahaj. We hit it off, and I immediately moved to that area, and I lived in the band rehearsal room.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So real commitment, real sacrifice there. What was that audition process like?
Just go in and play a couple songs. Yeah, nothing special.
I've had the good fortune and pleasure of interviewing other professors at Berklee, and one of the things they talk about is not only learning one specific genre of music, but trying to become more of a holistic player with any instrument. Was that your experience as well? Did you?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I dabbled a lot in everything. When I started at Berklee, I was way into rock, and then they kind of brainwashed that out of you, and I started getting into a lot of jazz and fusion and funk and all that stuff, so it definitely made my chops a lot more versatile. But then when it came time to start a band, I was, all the stuff that was going on was rock and hard rock and, at the time, nu metal. So that's what I found myself playing.
And that was really your passion, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, I had several passions.
Yeah. So you connect with the guys in Ra. Mm-hmm. Where does it go from there?
Well, it was really just kind of Sahaj and I in the beginning, because as soon as I joined the band, the drummer actually ended up going on tour with another artist.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yep.
And so it was him and I, and we got a bass player and a drummer. Went through a few different bass players and drummers, and we're playing shows for bartenders. And then I gave we had a demo that I gave to the singer from the band I was in previously, Absence of Faith, who was really good friends with some of the DJs on WAAF out of Boston. And so he gave DJ Mistress Carey our demo album, which was pretty high quality, and she loved it. And AAF decided to test one of the tracks, and it went really well. Okay. And then people started requesting it, and it went into regular rotation, and it from there got picked up by other radio stations across the country, and it kind of just took off like wildfire. And we went from playing to bartenders to playing to sold out shows with lines wrapped around the club in a matter of just a couple months.
Incredible, amazing. I've talked with other artists about this, and this must be a trip. The first time you heard your song, your music on the radio,
Oh, yeah.
What was that like?
It's amazing.
Right.
Yeah, it's,
I did that, right?
Yeah. I think the first time I heard it, I was in the car and I just pulled over. Yeah, and
just enjoyed it, right?
Yep.
Yeah, because you knew you were listening to it with thousands, maybe millions of other people, right?
Yeah, and I'm actually, we were on the tail end of, I actually got to see myself on MTV too.
Okay.
Actually.
Interesting.
And yeah, I was in a bar in New Jersey, and they had MTV2 on, and there we were.
What was the song?
Do You Call My Name? That was our first single. That was the song
Very cool.
that all that stuff happened with.
So you start getting this massive airplay, and the way it used to happen in the music business, I'm not so sure it happens this way anymore, is you get signed to a record contract, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Universal came in?
Yeah, Universal Records came in and signed us. So through that, we actually released an EP on our own, and we sold 10,000 copies in just a handful of weeks. So Universal came in and signed us right away. And yeah, so that was like the tail end where records were still selling, but Napster was like the big thing. And we actually literally signed $1 million record deal, which they do not give you $1 million. And
Can you help shed some light on whatever you want to share about that? Because I talk a lot about on my show of the business of music, and a lot of it's changing. But what was that? How was that process?
Well, our deal was like an old school deal. What would have been a good deal when records still sold. And the deal we signed, we basically, to round it out to be approximately right, we basically made about $1 per album. That was the deal. But the way it all works is you get an advance that you have to record on, you have to promote on, do all the marketing, you have to use this tour support, and all that stuff. And then you have to pay that back, but all that, say you're selling the albums for $15, which is probably right around the ballpark, even a little under what they were selling for then. So the money you're paying back, only $1 of that out of each 15 comes back. So if you get a $1 million budget, which is what $1 million record deal is, and then they spend all that, then you have to sell 1 million albums before you even make a penny on an album sale.
Yeah. And how did that album do?
We sold 350-ish thousand. I don't even remember anymore. Yeah. But somewhere on that, we didn't sell 1 million because I don't think anybody sold 1 million anymore. That was like.
But still, really respectable. 350,000. That's a lot of albums.
Yeah, we did really well. That was a good selling album at the time because the industry was seriously tanking. We were just on the cusp of that, or even just, right on the precipice of the downfall.
I certainly have some thoughts about it, but tell me your thoughts about the whole Napster thing, everything that happened with that business part and the internet and with the music business.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was inevitable, and I think the record companies dug their own graves because they were making such a massive profit on selling pieces of plastic. They didn't want to change that, and I don't think they embraced any kind of change, and they fought it for long enough that they ended up ended up way behind the game, so that all these free services came out, people could peer sharing and all that, and
right.
And it is what it is, and now it's definitely in the world, and whatever, it is what it is.
It is what it is. It seems like, though, the movie industry and other, books, online books, that kind of stuff, they don't tolerate that as much. I mean, if you hired a plumber to come to your house you wouldn't just say, hey, thanks so much, have a great day, and not pay them, right? Seems like we have some feeling of ownership in today as far as music goes, that it's mine, I'll take it however we want.
Mm-hmm. And that's part of the culture that I think the record industry had a slight hand in, not necessarily creating, but in facilitating by lack of embracing change, because it became readily available when instead of they could have been rolling out something out 20 years before. Because I don't think the streaming thing's really big now, but we're literally 15 years late on that,
right,
if not more.
Exactly. Yeah. So talk about like the first time you go into maybe some of the stories of going into the studio and recording an album, but what was that first experience like for you?
Well, the first big studio I was in was we recorded From One, which was our first album, at Sound on Sound Studios in New York City, which is where many people have recorded. And we recorded with producer Paul Logus, who has done a lot of stuff with like P. Diddy and J-Lo, but he also did Pantera's first album. Wow. So he did some stuff with them, and he was a friend of the band. He was a fan of the band. So we, when we got a deal, we brought him on to produce the album. And being in a big studio for the first time when you're 25 years old is pretty amazing. Plus, I was really shy when I was younger. I was extremely shy. Okay. So that
you wouldn't know that now. So.
Well, that gets beaten out of you when you live on a tour bus for a decade.
You gotta start being at least ambivert, right? The introvert, extrovert kind of thing. So yeah. Talk about touring, the good, the bad, the ugly.
Touring, when I was 25, in my 20s, it was awesome. It was playing in a different city every night for thousands of people, and everything's free, all the booze. People are crazy about you, and it's an intense energy, and it's very entertaining, and a little, at first it was extremely overwhelming until you kind of dive into it. And then and I was really shy, like I said, so I actually started drinking. I would drink to kind of be more social, and it worked well. Plus, it doesn't hurt when you're endorsed by Jägermeister and Red Bull.
Okay. Not you personally, but the band, right? Okay, maybe you personally, I don't know, but yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we were endorsed by both at the same time, so I discovered Jaeger bombs.
The nice combo there, right?
Yeah. Sure. And then it's crazy. You get a rider every night. We had bottles of liquor in a couple cases. We had 2 bottles of vodka, a bottle of Crown, and we had Jaeger all the time, and a Red Bull, and then 2 cases of beer, and it was crazy. Yeah. And when you're in your 20s,
sure,
it's basically like living in a traveling frat house. Right. I guess I never did that, so.
Yeah, and no brown M&Ms in your rider as well.
Well, we were never as big as Van Halen.
Okay, but we can live with the legend, right? So yeah. So. What started to happen? What were you feeling as far as with the touring, the recording, both positive and?
Well, on the one hand, it's absolutely amazing to be making a living playing music. On the other hand, dealing with record labels is music actually becomes secondary. You kind of just have to have good songs, but so much time goes into all the other stuff, dealing with record labels and trying to get the hit song. And at the time, the big thing was getting the crossover single so you could transfer over into pop radio, and battling with record labels, because the first album did really well, and then with the second album, we wanted to get right back out on the road, so we actually went in the studio and recorded. I don't remember exactly how long, but a few months we delivered an album. And the record label was like, we don't hear a single. So we went back with it, because all that stuff was self-produced. And then we went back with Bob Marlette, who's done a lot of stuff with tons of people, everyone from Sabbath to Seether, and I don't know who else, but there's a long list. And we went in and did a batch of songs with him, very expensively, and then brought it back to the label and like, we don't hear a single. And then went back in and did another batch of songs with Bob Marlette, and then brought it back to Universal, and they weren't going to put out the album, so we ended up going out on the road, and brought a camera with us, and we were going out, and we were selling out like 2,000 seaters and filming it and sending them the footage, and they're like, all right, maybe we'll put out the album.
And they're not always the smartest bunch, right? I mean, a lot of bean counters.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the way the record industry was at that time. It was earlier. I think there's an awesome Frank Zappa interview where he talks about that, where back in the day, it was a bunch of guys that were well known by themselves to be uncool, so they'd be like, I think the way he put it was this cigar chomping guys. So like, I don't know, we'll throw it out. Right, sure. And now you have all the guys, or at that time, I'm out of the loop now. You have all the guys that think they know what's cool.
Talk about, though, what kind of strain or stress does that put on a band? The creative process, when you guys just want to write music that you feel in your heart and soul and is good, and then you get the feedback that we don't hear a hit or whatever, when you may not even be going for a hit.
Yeah, well, it's frustrating. It's frustrating, and I guess that's a game they play with everyone. It's just what they do. That's how they push bands to write better music. It's absolutely horrible tactic, but that's the way it works. So we did that, and then we ended up putting an album together out of those 3 periods of time. And the album we released, the first single we actually released was a song called Fallen Angels, and that was the second song we recorded in the very first batch. And then the second song we released was the very first song we recorded in that first batch, which happened to be a Police cover called Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic, which did really well and got a lot of airplay on pop radio, and I used to hear that in like CVS and Best Buy into that circuit.
So there was your crossover hit then, right?
Yeah, and it is really in hindsight at that time it was kind of really angering, because all the songs we ended up releasing as singles were all from that first, and then by going back and doing that, we ended up spending all this money that we didn't need to spend to have album tracks that we could attach a famous producer's name to, who is Bob Marlette. It's awesome. So it was a really cool experience, but a lot of money spent there. Yeah, a lot.
Right. Yeah,
a lot.
that you
Hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Sure.
Yeah.
That you didn't need to have spent. So yeah. What were some of the highlights for you, Ben, at this point in your career? Places you were playing, bands that you were playing with, whether you were opening or they were opening for you? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I got to play with a lot of bands that I grew up listening to, from Korn. I think the first time we did a big show, going back to the first album, From One, we were still, the first album wasn't even out yet, but this single was rolling out across the country, and we were invited down to Virginia Beach to play a radio station show, and with Korn and Disturbed, and that was amazing. So we rented a couple minivans to go down, because at that point in my life I hadn't even stepped foot on the tour bus yet, and we went down there, and backstage, and I remember hanging out with Sahaj and David Draymond, and I didn't dare to say a word, and then Sahaj had to leave for something. I think I turned around and ran. But I remember then getting on stage, and the stage was so massive. I remember being up front and hitting a couple chords, and went to go back and fiddle with my amp a little bit, and my guitar cord literally didn't reach my amp, because I had a snake that ran up front to my pedals. Wow. And I remember I couldn't even reach my amp. I guess this is it. Right. But yeah, that was very memorable. That was our first big show, and I just remember how big the stage was from that perspective. I mean, you get used to it, but the first time, extremely memorable when the stage is like the size of a house.
Right. It's not the same as playing at a small, intimate club, right? It's for a couple hundred people.
When you're doing your best not to bump into the singer.
So those are some of the highlights. What have been some of the biggest challenges that you've experienced and overcome and learned from?
The biggest challenges were all dealing with record labels, because we ended up getting out of the deal with Universal, and we actually fought to get off, and because they knew they screwed up, but that's another whole story that I don't even want to talk about. And we ended up finding what we thought was going to be a really cool indie label out the West Coast, Cement Shoes Records, and we ended up talking to them, and we recorded a live album for them as our first album, and it was all kind of botched from there. You know, we never ended up actually signing with them, but they released our album.
Really? How does that work?
And the first batch of albums they put out wasn't cut right. Like, it was the songs, you know, a lot of the talking was supposed to be cut out in between, and the version they ended up pressing was not that version. And we had one studio song on there which they accidentally put on the album in mono.
Oh no!
Yeah, and that was actually because our second album with Universal, Duality, the first pressing, there was actually a glitch in the first track, which was the single. Oh, no. Like right in the intro, there was like a skip, and it was in the press. So this was something. So that was the frustrating stuff. It was all dealing with record labels that aren't really paying attention, and they're only after the bottom line. Right. But that's the way it's
reality of it sometimes, right? Wow.
Yeah.
Awful. So some of the biggest obstacles were dealing with the record companies, but also something for you shifted, something for you changed musically. Can you tell us about that?
Well, you know, just after dealing with that, because we signed to Universal in 2002, and then, you know, we were on the road straight for quite a while, and by the time 2008 or 2009 rolled around, I was just not excited about being on the road anymore. And you know, at that point, I was in my early 30s, and the whole drinking thing wasn't as fun anymore. That whole lifestyle of being in rock clubs every night. And at that point, you know, the band went to hiatus. We decided to take some time off, and I moved to Portland, Maine, and did not know what I wanted to do next. Had no idea what I wanted to do next. I just knew I didn't want to keep, you know, playing rock music, living on a tour bus, and battling record labels indefinitely.
So you needed a break.
Yeah. So I came up to Maine and just started exploring a lot of different things. You know, I started practicing meditation and taking meditation classes, and started doing a lot of hiking, getting out into the woods and just decompressing, and started studying Reiki, and started just going to all these different things that I could find. And one of the things that I ended up finding was a friend of mine that I had kind of known back when I was a teenager, and she was doing work with singing bowls, and I was just instantly drawn to the singing bowls. And so I ended up, a couple years later, I ended up buying a singing bowl, because I was curious what it'd be like to sing with them. So I ended up buying a singing bowl kind of on a whim, and I enjoyed singing with it, so then I bought a bunch more. And you know, I was also just getting into a lot more of chilled out music, you know, just meditation music, or the chill station on what's it? I can't remember what it's called. The Pandora station. I can't remember the one I listened to, but it's like, you know, it's just mellow music, mostly instrumental. And I just, after that fiasco and just being at rock shows every night for like a decade, I just didn't want to listen to hard rock music anymore. But I got the singing bowls, and I started playing with those, and people knew I had them, so I started being asked to go out and perform with the bowls, first accompanying other people, and then by myself. And then eventually I started doing that with my voice as I was doing it at home. And that's just kind of organically grown into what I do for a living now, which is doing sound journeys, sound healing journey workshops is what I call them. We're basically doing meditation music and guiding people.
Yeah, I mean, it's really powerful. I've been able to experience it. It's really a powerful modality and powerful musical experience. And because I'm a drummer, I love it because it looks like a big drum set of of singing bowls. But say a little bit more about what was it about the singing bowls that called to you, and I mean, it sounds like it changed you musically.
Yeah, I mean, well, lots of things were changing before the singing bowls. Just, I guess it started changing as soon as I moved to Maine. A really good friend of mine, who's an awesome vocal coach, a guy named Jamie Vendera, who a lot of people might know from Mythbusters. He was the guy that broke the glass with his unamplified voice on Mythbusters, but he's also an amazing vocal coach. Works with guys like James LaBrie from Dream Theater and Miles Kennedy and lots of other people. But he was a good friend and used to always come to Raw shows, and we actually launched a company together at that time called Rock Source 360. We had online lessons with a bunch of different people, big name musicians, which ended up not working out. But Jamie basically told me, I asked him if he had any students, because I was gonna, I didn't know what else to do, so I was like, maybe I'll start another band. And he was like, well, I'll teach you how to sing. I was like, okay. So I started working with Jamie, because when you have like a world-class vocal coach, like, I want to teach you. It's like, all right. And that starting to use my voice, actually started to change a lot of things, just more connection with the body. And I started, I started a rock band because I didn't know what else to do, and that got old really quick. And then I started just doing acoustic gigs for a year or so. But practicing a lot of voice, and that just kind of seemed to open things up. And that, on top of all the other stuff I was doing, meditating daily and meeting all these wonderful people that were doing different things, just intentional communities and people actually caring for things more than ambition, which is an alien world after being in a rock band. Well, when I first heard the singing bowls, there's something about them that's just so centering. They kind of just shut down the part of your brain that's dictating your reality and just bring you to a nice, deep, centered space. It's almost like they remind you of something that's so familiar, something that like precedes our existence in this physical reality space. They kind of had that inkling of familiarity, like there's something to that, and that's what really drew me to that, and started exploring music from a completely different perspective. I started working, before I had the bowls, I started working a lot with tuning forks, and I was doing that every single day with some interesting effects. You'd shifting consciousness. Literally, the first time I got my tuning forks, I ordered them online and they came in the mail, so I got them at home and I started playing with them and putting them all over my body, and I made myself wasted.
Right, really?
Yeah. I was like wasted, and not, I was like wasted, like sick to my stomach a little bit, and just like drunk off the sound. So I was like, all right, this is actually pretty powerful.
Yeah. Change something vibrationally inside you.
Yeah. And so I started waking up to a little bit more respect for the power that sound actually has on the human body, especially used intentionally and used in ways other than just putting together, candy bar songs.
And I know that you do the workshops with the singing bowls. Do you practice those, or you just do what's natural, what you feel called to do?
Well, when I first got them, I was using them every day for myself, just kind of traveling on the sound, using them as kind of as a meditation. I would just play the bowls and sing with the bowls and kind of travel on the sound. And that was my own personal practice. When I started being asked to do the bowls for other people, I did not do that in front of anyone, because that was mortifying.
It felt private, right? It was personal.
Yeah, very private and personal.
Yeah, sure.
And I was doing that for myself, but then eventually, through a series of swift kicks in the butt by the universe, I decided to go out and do a few to see what it would be like to sing with the bowls in front of people. And I booked 3 events in 4 days, because I knew if I did one and it was bumpy, I would never ever do it again.
Smart, right?
So I did 3, and it went really well. One of them was at an Enlightenment Expo, so there was a lot of people there and a lot of vendors that own places, and from that I got a bunch of offers to do that for other places, and it kind of picked up really, really quickly, and I a month or two after that, it was my main source of income, just kind of like boom.
Yeah,
it's like the same way the band was like, playing for bartenders, and then boom, you get a line around the building. Just something, that same kind of experience of things kind of magically attracting and pulling together. Magnetic attraction. It's hard to describe, but I remembered it from the From One days before the album was even recorded. When the band started to blow up, it's like things start working out and coming together, and just kind of everything kind of tightens up into a flow, and you're just in that, and things happen quick. And that same thing happened with the sound work. It's totally unexpected. It wasn't even on my radar.
Well, usually a sign, though, that at least in that moment, that's what you're supposed to be doing, and it's going in the right direction, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's an understatement.
Yeah. Right. Do you also teach the singing bowls? Because I know you still teach guitar.
I don't, and I haven't, but it's something that I'm planning on doing. I've recently moved into a bigger space, and that's something I'm thinking about doing further down the road. I've been teaching guitar since I was 17, so I'm 41. So that's however many years that is. I even lost track.
Right. Let's talk about that. You teaching guitar. Give me a glimpse of. I am a total. I've only picked up the guitar once or twice. I come to you for a lesson. Where do you start folks with?
Well, if I'm working with beginners, which I don't normally teach beginners anymore. I used to, for a while after I was teaching for a living. In between Ra and the sound stuff, I was just teaching 2 days a week, like as many students as I could fit in those 2 days, which was pretty cushy working 2 days a week.
Sure.
Gave me all the time to explore the other stuff. But as far as what I teach, it really depends on the student. All the lessons are definitely custom tailored, but one thing, everybody gets a basic chord knowledge and understanding and deep respect for rhythm and groove and working with the grid, that style stuff, and scales and the fundamentals are extremely important.
So at this point in your career, it's more intermediate and advanced players that you are teaching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably more. I do get advanced students every once in a while, which is a lot of fun and awesome. But usually mostly intermediate students these days, which is still a lot of fun.
Sure. Yeah. You teach online, in person, both?
I teach online. I've been teaching exclusively online since 2008. I switched over. Actually, it was again Jamie Vandera who recommended it.
Where can people go to get a lesson with you?
For guitar lessons, bencarrollmusic.com. There's information on that website. That's kind of like my guitar and rock music website. And then the sound website, I have a website for the sound work, and that's innerselfsustained.com.
Tell me more about that website and what you offer there.
On Inner Self Sustained?
Yeah.
That one, they're event lists, because I do a lot of events all over New England and down the East Coast. So those are there, but I also have a blog that I write in extremely regularly until about the end of May, when I started getting ready to move, and I haven't posted a blog since May. But blog posts are there, and videos of me doing the stuff with the sound bowls, with the singing bowls, and all different kinds of stuff like that.
When you're doing a singing bowl workshop, what do you want people to feel?
I just want people to show up and be open. What they feel is really up to them, and where they are at in the moment, and what they need on a conscious level, but more so on a subconscious level, because we're all, so this culture that we live in is so fast and narrow that a lot of people are missing out on a lot of important things that might be bubbling up inside themselves. There's a lot going on in the world right now. A lot of things are changing, and a lot of people don't necessarily have the opportunity to kind of delve into that, because on one level, people are so busy with their lives that it's hard to not just take the time, but figure out how to get down past that. And then I also have a lot of people that are energy workers and things like that, who are in tune with stuff like that. But I get a lot of people that it's their first experience with doing that kind of sound work, which is really interesting. But yeah, it's all about just showing up and being open.
Yeah. I think it's pretty brave, the shift that you have made. A lot of people would find that really difficult, that you basically were a rock star, living the rock and roll dream, really. And I mean, a lot of maybe yours too, but a lot of my musical heroes didn't either slow down or stop, and they went over the edge and they're no longer here.
Yeah. I've seen that.
Yeah. How did you do that?
It was hardwired into my soul. I don't know. A lot of my life, certain things I've described it as free will on train tracks. I definitely definitely have free will and can make choices, but it seems like things are laid out in a way that I'll make choices that lead me in specific directions. When I first got into sound and in music, I was very musical as a kid, long before I discovered the guitar, just using voice and anything I get my hands on. And I just remember, being very connected with sound, and all the jamming I did in high school. A lot of it wasn't a lot of playing songs. It was kind of playing sound and traveling on that sound with friends. And I have a very specific memory of I don't know how old I was, somewhere between 9 and 11, laying on a hammock in my yard. I grew up in a fairly rural place, but it was near Salisbury Beach, and they used to have the planes that flew by that dragged the long banners behind them. And I remember laying on a hammock on a nice warm summer day, and the drone of that plane engine, I just kind of traveled into that sound, and it was like such a deep space, deep relaxing, connected to something deeper. And that was a pretty young age, and that connection to sound was always there. And but then growing up in the culture that we live in, you want to be a musician, you got to write songs because you need to get on the radio and you need to get a record deal. Or the other way around, you need to get a record deal so you can get on the radio, which is the way it used to be. Fortunately, it doesn't. They're not the gatekeepers they once were.
I mean, clearly you've done both, and it sounds pretty clear that you have a strong belief or faith that music, and I think this is true on many levels, but there's a healing aspect or power of music.
Yeah, healing, very much. Healing, but also consciousness expanding, transporting. But the physical makeup of our reality is vibrational. Everything is vibration and movement, and sound is the best manifestation we seem to have for that in our form. It's extremely powerful, especially when used in specific ways. Not even just that way, because there's something really powerful about blasting Led Zeppelin when you're
right. That could be healing as well, right?
Yeah. But working with drones and working with specific intentions and sound that kind of, the way I was talking about with the singing bowls, kind of bringing you to that centered place, you can access deeper parts of yourself. And I mean, I don't know for sure. I don't know what I normally say is it's not the sound so much that does the healing, although it can help move and shift a lot of things physically in the body quite effectively, but it's getting to that space in your mind where you're down past the programmed part, that you're programmed with this set of beliefs. When you can get past that, then a lot of that programming can get pushed aside, and we can be very effective at healing ourselves when we get past the programming that tells us we can't.
can you say any words of advice for someone who might have been in your shoes or is right now, as far as have some success and maybe feeling like they want to change or to slow it down, but really hard, I would imagine, mentally, of like, I can't give this up, this is, you know, really challenging and difficult. What?
Oh God, I know that well. I spent like, let me see, about 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, about 4 or 5 years not knowing what I was doing. You know, guitar lessons was never supposed to be my main gig. It was just allowing me the thing to kind of explore. And I kept having people tell me, you know, you should be doing sound healing. And I was like, that doesn't interest me.
So people were telling you that. Yeah. Interesting.
And but the best thing that I did was I allowed myself just to explore musically. I was lucky enough to have that space where I was teaching 2 days a week, and then I had 5 days a week to do a lot of different things, whatever I fancied. And a lot of that was playing with sound. Like I started working with the tuning forks, and then I started working with the singing bowls. And I had no idea what the hell I was doing. I just was doing it and exploring it, but that all became part of my practice as I moved forward. It was all kind of awakening things within me and reconnecting things, making pathways, different pathways for the brain to be able to function in different space, because we get in these habits of doing things. Like that's why, even though I didn't want to live on a tour bus anymore, I didn't know what to do when I first stopped touring, so I immediately started a new rock band.
That's what you knew, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sure.
But then, coming up to Maine was the best thing I could have done, because it kind of tucked away. But yeah, as far as advice for anybody that's looking to make a transition is be patient, because it's really frustrating. Patience, and be willing to explore.
Great. Are there other different artists today that you listen to and connect maybe more on the sound healing level?
Yeah, I listen. I have a really hard time finding good music these days. I mean, there's a lot of music out there, but just something that really, really just, you know, kicks up that excitement like Led Zeppelin did for me when I was a teenager, you know. I've discovered a few. My newest discovery is Wardruna. I don't know if you've heard of them. Oh. They're awesome. They're a Norwegian band. They play like traditional Norwegian music, kind of like Viking music. And they are absolutely amazing. I went and saw them in Boston in February, and I love those guys. Just, you know, they a lot of drums, but, you know, like hand drums, and some horns, but they're traditional instruments. But it's just great music. And one of the only rock bands I'm listening to these days is a band called Kiev, West Coast band, and they're just absolutely phenomenal musicians. Great drummer, great. I think they're a 5-piece, but yeah, and then just a lot of relaxing music. And I actually discovered Tom Kenyon, because when I started singing with the Bowls, a lot of people, I kept being asked if I knew who Tom Kenyon was. So eventually, I explored that, and I've got a couple of his albums that I listen to regularly. He's as far as sound healing, singing with singing bowls, he's probably the biggest one out there.
Lastly, where do you want your music to go at this point in your career?
Well, at this point, I actually have 21 albums out, which is a lot. Yeah. And my favorite album out of all of those is an album I released in 2016 called Multidimensional Voice. And that album, I recorded over 2 years, and I had just gotten the Bowls, and I was just playing around and exploring, and I didn't even know I was making an album at the time. I was just recording tracks. I can't even call them songs. There's no words. There's a lot of singing. There's a lot of percussion and bass and keys more as pads, but there's some piano in there, some strings, and that's my favorite album out of all of those albums, and my goal is to start working on a follow-up to that soon, because that actually did really well. And that was basically when I started putting it out into the world that I was doing something different, because I released that before I was doing a lot of singing bowl work out in the public. Well, that's not true. I was doing singing bowl events without singing, though, just with the bowls. But when I released that album, it was completely different than anything I had done in the past. And I had a release date picked, which was August 8th, 2016, 8/8/16, and like the month before that, I sent copies of the albums to half a dozen friends or so, and I never heard anything back from anyone. So, and like the release date was coming, and I was like, oh my God, this is gonna suck. And but it ended up doing really well, and it sold pretty well, and it got airplay all over the world, got really good reviews. It made it to number 16 on the New Age charts, on the ZMR charts, which was really good, because for an album I almost didn't even want to release. Right. And that that kind of changed everything. And I guess I wouldn't be doing the Sound Healing Journey Work workshops if I hadn't released that album, because that gave me confidence to kind of move in that direction. And yeah, my main goal right now is to record a follow-up to that.
And how did you record that album?
I recorded it in my own studio. Okay. Yeah.
And when might we be able to look forward to the next one?
Sometime after I start working on it. The last one took me 2 years to make, but this one shouldn't take that long, because the last one I didn't know what I was doing. I was just recording music.
Sure. Do you already have thoughts or ideas that are forming around?
Oh yeah.
It? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Great.
And a lot of those have been coming about through doing the workshops with people.
Okay. Yeah. And do you record some stuff into your phone at this point? You have a pad it's all in your head. Yeah. And so that you'll be able to put down somewhere and record.
Yeah, it's a lot different than writing songs. It's a lot more organic. When I was working on Multidimensional Voice, I started with drones, and some light percussion. It was all just like hand drums and shakers. There was, and but yeah, there's not really a process to it. It's not a song. Sure. Just kind of going where it goes. I just basically have some melodies I want to start working with, and just allow them to go where they go.
It's fantastic. And obviously that album was really successful, and you got a lot of good feedback with that. What's the reaction been to whether your old bandmates or other folks that you sent those CDs to that you didn't hear back right away?
Well, I actually didn't send any to the guys in Raw. Okay. But I sent one to Jamie Vendero, who really likes what I'm doing. He absolutely loves it. He just didn't get a chance to listen to it, and I sent it to other friends that were local in Maine that were doing things, and they all like it as well. But yeah, just timing. Sure. August and May, nobody wants to sit down and listen to an album for an hour. Right. We got to be outside, because we only have 3 months of that. That's
right. It's only a few more minutes of warm weather here, so yeah. So then for folks, lastly, Ben, who want to connect with you, whether guitar lessons or the sound singing bowl healing workshops, where can they do that with you?
The website I'm using for everything these days, except for the teaching stuff, is innerselfsustained.com. It's INNERSELFSUSTAINED. And yeah, there's event listings there, and there's quite a lot of those coming up.
Yeah, and if you haven't been to that kind of thing before, or a workshop, check it out. It will change your life. So, Ben Carroll, thank you so much for being on Musicians on the Record today.
Thank you for having me.